Now that 2024 has come to an end and we're starting a brand new year, I would really like to, before it gets too late in the year, to reflect upon the sort of creative productivity that I've had in the last year and, you know, just a lot of the things that I've made, because it has been quite a successful year in my opinion. In total, I made about 35 items, which is quite a shockingly large amount, given that a lot of these things were very intricate, complicated things like, you know, colour work, but not of the Fair Isle kind, so a lot more complex. Things like sweaters, coats. I made an entire quilt at one point. So it's been a very impressive year for me in terms of making stuff. Some of these things were, of course, very spacey themed, and those are specifically the things that I'd like to share with you today and hopefully inspire you to add a little bit more creativity to your enthusiasm for space, which I'm sure if you've clicked on this video that you must have somewhere deep down inside. And I'd really encourage you to take this video as some inspiration for projects for the next year. In total, with regards to everything I've made with the topic of space in mind, I've made 3 knitted items, 1 hat and 2 garments, 1 sewn item that was my graduation vest, and then 2 crochet items which we don't have today because they were gifts for other people, but I do have some very nice pictures to show you. So to start the year off, I would like to share with you the Space-Time Hat by Ingerberg. It is a very intricate yet surprisingly deceptively simple colourwork hat that is just very plain sort of beanie style, but what really makes the hat, you know, shine is the intricate colour work that, you know, has very interesting like space-time, just special relativity and general relativity themes. Namely, we've got the Einstein field equations on one side over here. We've also got the Earth, which is bending, you know, the fabric of space-time around it, which I thought was so cool. And then on the other side, we have a more special relativity design. So we've got the light cone, which actually is labelled as well. We've got the future light cone and past light cone, and we've got the observer axis and on the axis, and also space. I don't think we write the words time on it. Oh no, we do indeed at the bottom. Yeah, there were some things about it that were quite simple. For example, the fact that it's a very small hat. It's quite compact and easy to sort of carry around, and so in general being able to pick it up and knit it was quite easy. So it wasn't a demotivator in that sense. One thing that made it quite difficult, of course, was the fact that the colour work was not as simple as your typical Fair Isle. I had up to 36 stitches, I think 37 stitches of just pure black before I could go on to the colour work again, and so carrying floats was quite a tedious process. However, if you want to practice being good at carrying floats and twisting your yarn as you're knitting colour work, this would be the perfect project for that, in my opinion. She also has one hat design called the Mass Energy Hat, which if you're more into radiative processes and that kind of stuff, that would be the perfect hat for you. But yeah, I made the General Relativity one because I like General Relativity. The design uses 4-ply yarn. I specifically picked Opal Uni in the colourway Black Anthracite for the background colour, and then the main design colour was Opal Viridian, is it Schapfer? I can't remember what the word is, but you'll know this specific colourway when you see it. You probably can already tell. And it's in the colourway Kate, if I remember correctly, which has this very beautiful gradient between purple going down to a very nice like greenish colour, and then halfway through it sort of splits off into this very sharp sort of variegated colour, which is mixed between white and this very bright cerulean, which you can sort of see in the pom-pom here. There are some areas which still have that, but when I was doing the colour work, I found that the sharp contrast between the two colours made it very difficult to see the pattern, so I just cut those bits of colours out of the yarn, which called for more weaving in of ends, but I'm absolutely fine with that, and it made a much better design piece in my opinion. So the next make that I made that was knitting was the Space-Time Vest. Of course, the design, the colour work is of course credited to Gaia. She's the one that designed it and made it, but putting it onto a vest, and the basic vest pattern is my own design. It was just based off of taking measurements and swatching my gauge. It was really as simple as that, really. The main challenge I had with regards to this specific vest was making it so that the amount of stitches in the colourwork pattern, which is a fixed amount, correlates to a vest that will actually fit me. So, for example, you saw the 4-ply hat. If I just used that design and just opened it up flat, the actual measurements of the hat wouldn't fit my waist at all. So you need to change up your gauge and potentially adapt the pattern a little bit to make sure that the design fits you pretty well. And that's exactly what I did. It was a fairly simple bit of adaptation that I had to do. All I really did was, instead of using just one strand of 4-ply to make a very tight gauge, all I did was double up the yarn. So I used 2 strands of the uni 4-ply in anthracite, and then 2 strands of a green opal yarn that I can't remember what the actual name is, and I'm really sorry about that. I just picked it up, it was in the sale bin in my local yarn shop, and I thought, oh, I know exactly what this is going to be, and I decided to make this vest. So yeah, that was, I don't know the name of it, but I mean, if you wanted to recreate this, you've got hundreds of colours from opal to choose from. I mean, it's, you can make this your own thing, really. You don't have to copy my own design. But yeah, all I did was scale it up. So this was effectively knitted in double knit, essentially, as opposed to 4-ply. And then on one of these sides of the design, I think it was here, I just extended the grid pattern out a little bit more. So I only really had to increase the design repeat by about, I think, 8 or 9 stitches. So not a lot, but those 8 and 9 stitches correlate to about like 1.5 inches of extra room, which can add up quite a lot, especially when you're going from a tight fit to something with just a tiny bit more ease, which can really make or break the fit, in my opinion. Despite the hat being really simple to work up, and I think it only took about a week or 2, the vest was a very different story, and it took much longer. I think what had happened was, at the same time as I had finished off this hat, I was knitting a scarf as well. In fact, I have it right here. It's a very long scarf, this beautiful scarf, based off of the Lindisfarne shawl by Lucy Haig, which is just an absolutely amazing shawl. In fact, all of her designs are truly fantastic. I think I bought maybe like 5 or 6 of her patterns, and like I still need to knit up so many of her other things, and like I just love her so much. Her patterns are just amazing. But yeah, it was between that, which had quite difficult colour work, admittedly, and then this shawl, which is actually knitted horizontally. So you see all this length. All of these stitches were on the needle that I was using, and then you knitted it up sideways. So the needles got so heavy, and it took quite a long while just to get through one row. And I think that demotivated me a little bit altogether. And so when I had knitted up the vest, I had got through the ribbing quite quickly and completely fine. But I got to about 1/3 of the way through the colour work, and I just had to take a break for, I think, like a month or 2. I was just not feeling the vision. It wasn't coming together really well. I was like, oh, this is going to be too tight on me. I don't think it's going to be a good fit. I'm worthless. Going to all these tangents, and I just took a break from it for like a month or so. And then we were coming up to the final report that we had to write for general relativity, ironically. And I think as I was sort of getting into the swing of things, understanding it a bit more, and sort of being a bit more confident in the subject, I thought, you know what, I might as well pick this up and like give it another go and just try finishing it off and see if I like it or not. It doesn't matter if I don't. And in the end, it fit amazingly. I had to just give it a little stretch as I was blocking it out. But apart from that, the fit is fantastic. And it turned out into an amazing sweater vest that I don't know why I put it off for so long. I love it so much, and I wear it so much. And actually, when I was done, I showed it to my GR lecturer, Paul, and he really likes it as well. He was really impressed by it. So I don't know why I put it off for so long, but yeah, it gave me a bit more of a motivation boost when I had completed it. and so I'm really pleased with it personally. I think if I were to make it again, which I'm absolutely not going to do, one thing I would do is choose a little bit more of a rustic yarn. So as you know, sock yarns, and particularly Opal's wool yarns, are superwash wool and nylon. And I quite like superwash wool in terms of socks and some other purposes, but in general I much prefer a non-superwash, or more sort of rustic, unprocessed wool. And one of the reasons being is that superwash has quite good stitch definition, which can be great in some projects, but if you want colour work to really sort of blend in as though it's one piece of fabric, I would usually go with a non-superwash wool. Things like Lopi or Let Lopi is one of my favourite yarns in the entire world. It's fantastic for colour work, and I've got a bunch of it that I'm going to be using for a project, a couple projects down the line this year. But yeah, a superwash wool adds a lot of definition to your stitches, which you might not otherwise want, especially if float tension is something that you are still sort of getting the hang of. I wouldn't recommend it for that. But apart from that, I absolutely love this sweater. I don't know why I'm complaining. Yeah, I love it. Coming on to the final knit project that I had made, we have the Stella sweater, and I think the pattern designer is called Jenny Penny Knits or Jenny Penny Designs. I think it's the one with alliteration, if I remember. And she made this beautiful sweater called the Stella sweater quite a few years ago actually, and I had bought the pattern but never actually knit it up, because I just never found like the perfect yarn for it. But I finally did. The yarn I used for this one, I think, was Loch Lomond Bio, or one of the Loch Lomond yarns that's like a DK/worsted weight. And oh my goodness, this is such a delightful yarn to work with. It's so soft, and like its meterage is one of the most economical wool yarns I've ever had the privilege of working with, in my opinion. A typical sweater when I was much younger and a teenager and a little bit smaller, I would buy, you know, a 400 gram ball of like the Aran, like 80% acrylic, 20% wool blend yarns, you know, the ones that you see in a lot of yarn shops. And I would use that full of 400 grams to knit up my sweater. It would have a little bit of ease, you know, it wouldn't be a snug fit, a bit cozy. But yeah, I would use up the full 400 grams. But this one, it has a lot of ease, mind you. It is actually quite cozy, and yeah, you can see like it's quite big on me, which is perfect. It's only just shy of 250 grams, which is very lightweight, and it's so soft and fluffy. It's got so much loft to it. I love this yarn so much. I highly recommend it. They have quite a few good colours as well, apart from just green. I really do recommend you use that yarn, and I think it's got certified as well, so it's one of the more ethical choices you can make, which is something I really do prioritise in my material selection. Yeah, I haven't actually talked about the pattern now. Yeah, so that was knit with Loch Lomond and DK weights / worsted to the standard gauge, and yeah, it knitted up really nicely. I made this over the summer, which is probably not the best thing to knit up wool sweaters during then, but I did not care. The only adjustments I made to the pattern, well, they were not adjustments because the pattern fit pretty amazingly, but more so additions, was the fact that the colour work is pretty much restricted to the yoke. So once you knit up everything, you join it together and knit it in the round with the colour work design. But I decided to just add a little bit more uniqueness to it, I guess. Just something else to sort of keep my mind a bit more stimulated, because knitting just plain stockinette tubes can get quite boring, especially when you almost exclusively knit sweaters and vests, so I'd like to spice things up a bit. So I just added some colour work design, basically the same as the bottom rows of the yoke colour work, to the bottom of the body and also to the arms as well. You can see that over here. And so that just adds a little bit of extra sort of design and specialness to it. Another thing that I did a little bit later down the line, just to improve the fit a bit more, was add some short rows. If I remember correctly, the pattern doesn't include that, which is a real shame, because that was probably be the only thing I would say would take that pattern from great to stellar. I mean, literally. But yeah, I just added some short rows on the back over here. And so if you're not a knitter here, short row basically is just, it adds a little bit of extra length to the back piece here, so it creates that difference between the front and the back, and so it creates a much better fit in my opinion. As a guy, if you don't include the short rows, you get a very sort of boat-necked sweater, which I think on a woman would look fine, and but it's a bit too feminine for me. It doesn't look great at all. So I always make sure to add short rows, and usually if a pattern includes short rows, I will actually extend it a bit further so that it comes a bit further down to the front of the garment a bit more, just to build up more on the sides than just keeping it also on the back. And so once I had added those short rows in and gone in and fixed that part of the garment, it became one of my favourites. Of course, you probably can tell I wear it a lot in my videos, and yeah, it's just an amazing sweater. The one and only sewn piece of space-themed things I've made this year was my graduation vest, and this is probably one of my favourite pieces this year, of last year. It's just, oh my goodness, I love this so much. I can actually put it on over my vest. When I was graduating, I was a lot heavier than I was right now, so actually it is a little bit big on me, but with the vest underneath, it actually fills it out and like brings it back to its original shape and size, how it looked on me as I was walking down the hall and collecting my degree. Okay, so this is me wearing it on top of my vest. As you can see, it's filled up pretty nicely now. But yeah, this is the graduation vest that I had made. There is no sewing pattern for it, mainly because I drafted it myself based on my own measurements, as should most people when making their sewing patterns. Controversial opinion, I know, but store-bought patterns are absolutely crap. You should make your own patterns and learn to draft it. It's not that difficult, I promise. The back is made out of just a plain cotton voile. It's really nice, lightweight and breathable, but it's also fairly opaque. So are the linings as well, so the insides, it's all basically the same fabric. There is an interlining on the front pieces, and that's just to make sure that it has a bit of stiffness and smoothness. So you don't want to look all lumpy and bumpy, and you don't want it to be like too lightweight. It'll look a little bit shabby, in my opinion. And then the fashion fabrics on the front part, which is the main part of the vest, there are two layers. The underlayer is actually a cotton silk blend, so it has a very sort of, it's an unusual fabric. It has a really nice soft sheen to it, but only in like certain lines. It kind of reminds me of fibre optic cables, which is a weird thing, I know, but it does remind me of that. And then you've also got the sequin fabric, which is a very simple tulle fabric, which is very sheer, but on top of that you've got embroidered stars, you know, planets, really cute celestial designs, but also some very nice sequins. I was really drawn to this specific fabric, mainly because of all of the space themed fabrics. This one looks really, you know, high end, and its price was very high end, but it was in colours that I really liked, and it's quite difficult sometimes to get space themed fabric that isn't just blue. So I was really happy. I had stumbled upon this one on Etsy, and it was green as well, so I was so happy. I thought I had to get this one, and so I did, and I'm glad I did. In terms of actually the pattern, I should have specified this. I drafted it myself out of, it was based off of, it was sort of a mishmash between, let's say, late 18th century and Regency era sort of designs. So the top part you can very much tell is late 18th century, but then the bottom part, the way it sort of cuts off quite short, not as short as Regency, but very sort of similar, sort of like right angles just flat around there, was very much sort of Regency era sort of designing, which is very simple to actually modify. So in general, it was sort of based off of late 18th century tailoring guides and manuals, which is quite easy to construct and use, but yeah, it was basically just based off that. I'm saying the same sentence over and over again. In addition to that, a lot of garments of that era, a lot of waistcoats will have ties on the back over here, and that just lets you be able to adjust the waistcoat as you gain weight and lose weight. So really is a very handy sort of bits of extra detail, and so it means that for any very fancy occasions and events I can basically wear this whenever I want, and I won't need to worry about losing any more weight or gaining any more weight to fill it back up, so that's good. In terms of my PhD graduation, I'm not sure if I want to wear it for that. I say that, I really do want to, but I'm not sure if I'd want to perhaps make a waistcoat that's sort of more inspired by spirals and galaxy designs. I mean, this one does have some very nice spirals over here. In particular, this one's sort of like, actually, it's not actually a spiral, is it? It's very Ooh, how would we classify this one? Because you could consider that one as sort of like an outer ring as opposed to the spiral. So, but we've got two spiral arms over here, so that would be a grand design, but there's no bar. Oh no, there's shooting stars. There's stars embroidered on it. Okay. False alarm. But if the stars weren't there, technically that would be an SR type galaxy, if I remember correctly. So yeah, putting all my reading to good use. The last two projects are crochet projects, and unfortunately I don't have them on me right now because they were gifts that have now been given to people for Christmas and the New Year's. The first one was actually not the Gaia pattern, it was a cat protoplanetary disc that was made by, I think the designer is I Crochet Things or something along that lines on Ravelry, and it's a free pattern. It's a really good pattern, really well made in my opinion. It took me an evening to make it, and it whipped up super quickly, and if you use like chunky sort of fluffy chenille yarn like I did, you can actually get quite a sizable cat plushie, so that was really great. Yeah, and the only thing I really changed with that one was just the colour scheme. So for the cat I made it purple, a bit similar to the original one, but for the protoplanetary discs, the original pattern is for technically rings a bit similar to Saturn's planetary rings, but I thought, well, if I change it to orange and red I can make it into a protoplanetary disc, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. And of course, who I made it for, Sandra, she specialises in that. She's a third year who's very knowledgeable in protoplanetary discs and simulations, so I figured that would be the best thing for her given her love for cats as well. That one was a really nice make. I very rarely make sort of traditional amigurumi style stuff apart from my other protoplanetary discs that I've made, which whether you'd consider that amigurumi or not, I'm not sure. But yeah, that was a really nice venture into amigurumi making, and I had a great evening making it. The other and final thing that I made was, of course, the Gaia spacecraft, which has now been gifted to my supervisor. Yeah, that was a pattern that I had designed myself. It was quite fun to make. I did make a couple prototypes which did fail, because I really wanted to make it as accurate as possible, and that meant actually crocheting the components on the inside. But of course with crochet, as opposed to metal, it doesn't really hold up that well, so it didn't work at all. And so the main thing that I did instead was I figured I'd just make a tube and then stuff it, and so then it would have the structure just built into it naturally. It wouldn't flop around, it's a shame I couldn't make it more accurate, but oh well. I have actually made a pattern out of that you can find and purchase on Ravelry if you are interested. I would really like to also make one of the James Webb Space Telescope, because James Webb is quite cool. I mean, it's a very unique design, and I think there's a lot of interest in the telescope as well, so I figured maybe for this year I could also design a little mini James Webb that you can put on your desk. That would include the, I can't remember if it's Teflon or Kapton. Kapton? I think it's Kapton boats. Yeah, it should include those as well, plus of course the sails, and yeah, try and add a little bit more fine detail, try and keep it as accurate as possible while also being a little bit more playful with the design, given that it is crochet and we are not actually making a one-to-one replica of the James Webb Space Telescope, unless you have a few £billion to spare. So I think there we have it with all of the space themed things that I've made this year. Overall, I'm really pleased with just the amount of stuff that I've made, or the quality of the things that I've made, actually. I did make quite a few things. I had a fair bit of spare time with my summer holidays, which I did a lot of sewing and knitting during then. But pretty much with the exception of 3 individual garments, 2 of which were things that are only just slightly too big for me, but are actually perfectly fine to wear around and like use still, because they're very flowy, lightweight shirts like this one. But they're just slightly too large on the body, which is absolutely fine. And 1 vest that I had knitted extremely large, to an extremely large size, that like, I don't know how I managed to make that mistake, because it did fit me perfectly when I had made it. I swear it fit me perfectly, but I don't know, it just came out humongous on me. But apart from those 3 things, everything else fits me like a glove. I mean, I've made a glove as well, and that fits me pretty well, so yeah. But everything fit me so well, and I've taken so much time and care into like really handcrafting these things. So, you know, they are made to a really high standard, and they look great, they feel great, they fit great. And so I think overall, everything's just been a real big positive, apart from the vest, which I am actually going to be unraveling all the yarn and turning it into a new sweater, which I would love to share what I'm going to be making it into with you, but it's so perfectly tailored to like my PhD, and like the design is just so on brand for me that I really want to kind of like keep it a secret for now, and then share it later on. So I won't tell you what that is yet, but you will see it later on. In terms of space theme things that patterns that I really want to develop, I really want to take this year to sort of build on that as well. Last year I did release a couple patterns, I think 2 patterns, one of which was just the cosmological geometry pattern that I made a long time ago, but I really like reworked the introduction and the writing itself and made it a lot better, and had added some updated pictures as well. So, and then formally published it as its own thing. It's a free download. So technically, I mean, depending on your opinion on the Ship of Theseus, you could say that I've already made the pattern and it's just uploading it, or you could say I have basically made a new pattern. Depends on your opinion on that. But I also did like publish the Gaia Crochet spacecraft. Oh my goodness, my words. The Gaia spacecraft pattern as well, which is a paid for pattern, but I've kept it a low enough price to make it as accessible as possible. But yeah, so there were those 2 patterns. For this year, I would really like to try and grow the amount of patterns that I can make and share with you a little bit more. So one thing that I'm really interested in, of course, is the James Webb Space Telescope design, which I would love to do. This would probably be a very small scale model that I can make, but try and incorporate as many sort of technical details as possible. Keep it close to a replica as possible, but with crochet. Another thing that I'd really like to improve on is I had previously made an AGN pattern, which I'm not exactly very proud of, and would really like to transform it into something a lot more thorough and like a lot more detailed pattern, basically, because it shows you the dusty torus, the supermassive black hole, and also the narrow and broad line regions that you typically expect with a Cepheid or a quasar. And the teaching point with that is how obscuration can change the spectra that you view, and how quasars and Cepheids, although we separate them into type 1 and type 2, are potentially just the same thing. That is the case, we think, with most things, most Cepheids and quasars, although there is sort of like the debate as to whether or not that's true or not. But then again, when it comes to AGN physics, everything is up for debate, apparently. It's just, most things are just theories and models, it seems, which is kind of disheartening, but yeah. What can you do? Yeah, so I'd really like to actually expand upon that a bit more. I'd like to make the proportions a bit better, not necessarily more realistic, because that's not possible, but like, you know, just change up the proportions a bit, but also incorporate things that optional things like the jets, maybe even the X-ray Corona, I'm not so sure about that one, but also like change up the colours depending on what kind of AGN you want to actually recreate. So, you know, how we could change the colour between like a BL Lac, a Blazar, or an OVV, or like removing the jets and removing certain like other features to like represent like type 1 or a type 2, or other things like liners, which I'm not sure if I would want to include that into the pattern, but I'm not too sure yet. But basically just make like a build your own AGN pattern, which would be quite cool. Another pattern that I would really like to develop, and I have actually made prototypes for now, but would like to go a little bit further, of course, and actually like really flesh this out a bit more, is of course making your own galaxy. Not just an active galaxy or an AGN, but like the actual spiral arms and like the stellar disc and whatnot. So I'd really like to make like a little booklet on like making your own spirals, but also being able to customize it. So whether you want to add a spheroidal bulge or like a peanut shaped bar or a boxy bar, which I think most bars are that kind of shape. They're not actually sausage shaped, they're peanut shaped. I'll get into this in another video, because I have read up so much on bars now. I have to share my knowledge with someone, and you can see it's like coming out in this video, but I will save it for later. But yes, customizing the bar, customizing the spiral arms. So whether you want a grand design or a multi-arm spiral, or if you want to make a flocculent one, I would really like to try and develop a flocculent galaxy pattern as well, which would be really cool. I might also want to try and make a lenticular. I think a lenticular would technically be easier to make, because I don't think they really have spirals in the same way. I mean, they're quite gas poor, and gas clearly seems to be a really big sort of proponent in how spirals are generated, which once again I won't get into now. But yeah, I think a lenticular would be a really cool addition to that as well. So yeah. Galaxies, there's just so many different types and stuff, it's just amazing and overwhelming. But yeah, I would really like to develop a crochet pattern or a series of patterns on that as well, which I think would be really cool to do. But I would also love to get your opinions on what I could turn into a crochet pattern or represent through crochet, or even knitting. I am thinking of branching out into knitting patterns too, but I'm not so sure about that one on yet. I would love to hear your opinions, so like, please feel free to tell me about them. You know, you can reach me on Instagram, or of course comment down below under the video as well. But yeah, I would love to like communicate about that too. So please give me any ideas that you have. I would love to hear them. So my voice is starting to hurt a bit. I think I'm gonna make myself a cup of tea and get round to more programming. So I shall see you guys very soon with another video.